Before you listen, if you enjoy the stories and want to hear more, then please consider subscribing. Most of you listening aren't subscribed, so please take this time to subscribe. Turn on notifications so you'll never miss a story and be the first to hear. You'll also be supporting me. Thank you. My tiny apartment kitchen lacked any appliance besides an ancient mini fridge barely wheezing along. So when I spotted a full-size fridge listed on Craigslist for only $50, I jumped at the chance. The seller said it was a bit older, but still ran fine. It just urgently needed to get rid of it. I arranged to drive out that same afternoon and pick it up. I arrived at a modest house in a quiet suburb. A nice older lady named Betty answered the door. She brought me around to the kitchen where an avocado green fridge from the Cementies waited. Some scratches and scuffs marked the exterior, but otherwise it looked decently maintained. Betty said her husband used to tinker on appliances for fun but passed recently, leaving her with more equipment than one widow could ever use. I offered sincere condolences and handed her the $50 cash. With the help of a neighbor, we managed to carefully load the heavy but still functioning fridge into my truck. I cranked the AC, said goodbye to Betty, and headed home excited to have cold beverages on tap for once. No more lukewarm cans or scheduling groceries around melting ice packs. Things were looking up. I lugged the beast upstairs to my apartment and positioned it in the tiny kitchen. After a test plug-in, the motor churned to life. Triumph. The fridge cooled rapidly, though an odd smell emerged even with the door shut. Probably stale or mold. An easy fix, I thought at the time. I headed out to stock up on essentials like eggs, milk, veggies, maybe even an ice cream cake to celebrate my new appliance luxury. Stocked with grocery bags, I returned home, ready to fill my vintage deal. But when I opened the door, the smell from earlier had grown tenfold into a powerfully rancid stench. It bowled me over like a physical force, the saccharine rot of decaying meat left undisposed. I gagged and stumbled back, eyes watering. There must be leftover food forgotten deep in the back to cause such horrific fumes. Resigned to an unpleasant cleansing, I began emptying the contents onto my countertop. I removed each shelf and drawer, finding them oddly immaculate. No spills, stains, or grime whatsoever. Perplexed, I angled a flashlight deeper into the empty interior. The thick rubber lining and insulation appeared clean and intact. No clues presented themselves to explain the ungodly reek. After nearly giving up my search, a tiny irregularity in the back corner caught my eye. Among the textured ridges coating the interior, a smaller L-shaped seam did not align. I fingered along it curiously, detecting raised edges hinting at a hidden compartment. Pushing gently, a small metal panel shifted inward then to the side, revealing darkness within. Secret crisper drawers to keep sides of meat fresher. Some obsolete design quirk? Apprehension rose as I reached slowly inside, the stench emanating strongly from this void. My fingers made contact with something cylindrical and solid. Grasping it gently, the object emerged into the flashlight's beam. The breath left my lungs as unfamiliar dread gripped my stomach with an icy claw. For in my trembling hand sat unmistakably a human forearm severed cleanly above the elbow, gray flesh shriveled and peeling away from muscle and sinew parched dry by time and cold. Skin purpled with rot still clung in patches to the wrist and hand, bits of fingernail yet attached. Undoubtedly real, undeniably human. I collapsed against the counter, gagging violently, nearly blacking out from shock. Every horror movie nightmare sprung instantly to life before me. Whose arm languished for untold time in this infernal prison? And why inside the fridge of sweet old Betty, hundreds of miles from my own home? Blinking through panicked tears, impossible scenarios flashed through my mind. Betty or her husband, some serial killer using the appliances to hide dismembered victims. An unsuspecting wife storing her spouse's grotesque hunting trophies. Or had this malevolent icebox changed dark hands multiple times over the decades, leaving fresh horrors for each new owner along its sinister journey? I paced the apartment manically, peering out windows for suspicious vehicles, half expecting police SWAT teams to smash through the door seeking a limb's origin. But strangely no sirens or footsteps approached even hours later as I sat curled on the couch in the darkest corner. No context took shape through frantic speculation. Only the severed human remnant taunting me from the empty fridge, its origins no clearer in the harsh light of day. No answers would manifest to explain away the nightmare made real mere yards from where I cowered, wrestling dizzying implications. No sane options remained but to distance myself from the unfathomable evil inhabiting that accursed box. I could not sleep another night with that heinous entity leering nearby, consuming my thoughts with its impossible existence. Managing somehow through blind panic to wrap the gruesome parcel in old clothes, I stumbled with it down to my car like a sleepwalker. Only one desperate instinct pushed me forward, remove the horror from my own tiny world, and force it upon some new receptacle elsewhere, anywhere but near my own tenuous grasp on reality. I drove for hours in numb silence away from the city into remote countryside. Only when civilization faded completely to blackness did I finally pull to the roadside. With gloves donned, I gently laid the awful relic to rest in a ditch beside the woods. Indiscriminate nature, now its cold caretaker. Perhaps only by returning the severed limb to the anonymity of the elements could I free myself from its haunting implications that threatened my sanity. I peeled out in a cloud of dust, determined to outrun the living nightmare today held. But decades later, even far from that lonely road, I still shudder imagining where the matching parts of my strange traveler may lie in the world. And worse yet, pondering how many other mundane items surrounding me might contain unseen evils waiting patiently to reveal themselves once brought inside. Some doors open cannot again be closed, glimpses granted that cleave certainty from comfort. In those favored daylight hours, I chose necessary blindness to preserve my reality whole, at least what fragile remains that armless phantom left unshattered. I was eager to get my first car. Being 19 with a fresh license, I scored listings for cheap rides so I could finally ditch the bus. Most were rusted-out junkers barely held together by duct tape and luck. But one Craigslist ad caught my hopeful eye, a 1999 Civic with only 112,000 miles, and the $900 price tag fit right in my shoestring. Budget. This could be my ticket to freedom. I messaged the seller immediately, and we arranged to meet that afternoon. As I caught the bus across town, excitement mounted. No more standing in the rain or sitting next to weirdos. No more 30-minute walks home from my retail job after dark. Owning my own car represented a passport to the independent adult life I craved. I hopped off in a rough part of town full of vacant buildings and sketchy alleyways. Unease prickled as I double-checked the meeting address, an abandoned warehouse on the edge of a vacant lot. An odd spot for a test drive, but maybe the guy needed room to show off the car. I spotted a red Civic parked outside, so at least he hadn't given me a phony address. As I approached, a tall figure stepped from the shadows. He looked sly and jittery, but had kind eyes underneath a nervous energy. Sticking out his hand, he introduced himself as James. I explained my interest in the Civic, and he nodded enthusiastically, saying he was the original owner but needed cash quick to pay some bills. He led me over to the car, extolling its reliability and great gas mileage. Aside from some minor scratches, everything looked well maintained. James even provided recent service records. At only $900, this Civic was an absolute steal. We took it for a short test drive with James encouraging me to open it up on the straightaway. It handled smooth as silk. Inside and out, the car seemed almost too good to be true, just like the ad promised. After parking back at the warehouse, I told James on the spot that I'd take it. We stepped inside the dim warehouse to fill out the paperwork. Dusty boxes were stacked almost to the ceiling in rows, creating a narrow path back to a cramped office area. I felt a twinge of hesitation seeing this shady building as James' base of operations. But so far he had been nothing but polite. I probably just watched too many crime shows that made me paranoid of strangers. Still, my senses remained on high alert as I followed him back towards his makeshift office, my footsteps echoing sharply down the narrow passage. Inside the small room, a single bulb hung from the ceiling, casting harsh light over a sheet metal desk. James gestured me into a rickety chair while he dug through piles of greasy receipts and old parts manuals scattered about. Before I could sit down fully, searing pain erupted through my skull as James cracked me across the back of the head. Darkness swirled instantly. I collapsed helpless to the cold concrete floor, clinging desperately to consciousness. James' polite facade vanished, replaced by wild desperation. He kicked me viciously in the ribs, screaming to give him my wallet. Fighting to stay awake against the debilitating agony, I fumbled it from my jeans with shaking hands. This was no sale. James was a violent crook who lured cash-strapped prey like me to this remote spot to rob them. Maybe worse judging by the crazed look in his eyes. Fear shot. Adrenaline through my system. I needed to escape, or who knows what he might do to me. James rifled greedily through my wallet, lobbing cards and photos across the room. His face twisted in disgust, finding only $17 cash inside. Hardly enough for a tank of gas. He leaned down inches from my face, hot breath reeking of stale cigarettes. Shouting furiously, he blamed me for wasting his time dragging my worthless broke ass across town. My mouth went dry hearing those venomous words, realizing he saw me as more disposable nuisance than fellow human. Panic rising, I made subtle moves inspecting possible escape routes while James ranted. But there was only one way in or out of that narrow warehouse corridor. Unless I could overpower James somehow, I was trapped. Each frantic heartbeat heightened the terrifying reality no one knew where I was, and a violent, unstable stranger stood between me and the exit. I needed to placate him and buy time. I sputtered desperate excuses. The money must have fallen out of my apartment. I could call my roommate to confirm. James paused, uncertain whether to buy my act. Capitalizing on that split second of hesitation, I made my move. With every ounce I could muster, I swept James' feet from under him. He crashed down cursing as I leaped up, sprinting for freedom. I only thought to make it back outside so passerby might see me. Blinding pain throbbed through my skull, slowing me down. I heard James stagger back up, his shuffling footsteps gaining rapidly. 30 yards to daylight. I pushed harder. 20 yards up, James' hand grazed the back of my shirt. Terror fueled my final sprint just as hands clamped down ferociously, wrenching me backwards. We crashed to the concrete floor, a tangle of limbs writhing violently. I thrashed with animal ferocity, kicks and elbows landing wherever possible. James clawed at my face, trying to subdue me, but rage and adrenaline made me almost inhumanly strong. With a primal roar, I broke free, my shirt tearing as I crawled desperately towards freedom. Sunlight flooded my vision as I burst outside, sweet relief washing over me. My screams brought help instantly from a homeless woman camped nearby. With wide eyes, she pulled me to safety, dialing 911. In minutes, police swarmed as I recounted the ambush, barely able to form words between panicked sobs. As the adrenaline high crashed down, delayed shock set in, seeing hints of blood splattered on the ripped clothing. Soon enough officers dragged a handcuffed James outside. Face swollen and lip bloody from our fight, he averted his eyes from mine. Bravado gone, he looked like nothing more than a strung-out pumpkin over his head. Just another anonymous lowlife who almost ruined an innocent life over a few bucks. As he disappeared into the cruiser, profound relief finally settled on my shoulders. Against all odds, I had escaped becoming just another missing persons case on the evening news. Beaten and bruised, no doubt I would spend years working past deep wounds today's trauma, etched. But thanks to that one last-ditch effort, I would heal and live. Times were tough and I needed cash badly, so I decided to sell my old iPhone on Craigslist. It was a few generations outdated, but still worked fine. I snapped some photos of it in good light, wrote up an honest description, and posted the ad online. Within a day, I got an email from a potential buyer named Steve. He asked sensible questions about the phone's condition and battery life. His grammar and politeness seemed like good signs, so we arranged to meet that afternoon at a coffee shop downtown. I dug out the original packaging to make a good impression. This was my first tech sale on Craigslist, and I wanted it to go smoothly. I arrived early and grabbed a table. Soon enough, a 30-something guy in casual office clothes entered. He scanned the room until he made eye contact with me, and strode over confidently. "Hey there, I'm Steve. Hear about the iPhone?" He firmly shook my hand and gave a practiced smile. I'd noticed his expensive watch and leather shoes that seemed oddly formal for buying a used phone, but I brushed it off and pulled out the box for inspection. Steve looked over the device thoroughly, checking the IMEI number and testing all functions. I answered his questions politely as he continued examining it closely. He turned the phone every which way under the light, scrutinizing for any hairline scratches that might impact value. But I had taken good care of it over the years. The phone was pristine. After a few more minutes, Steve announced he was satisfied and ready to buy. Relieved, I gave him my asking price of $400 cash up front. His face changed, suddenly registering surprise. "Oh, the ad mentioned best offer," Steve countered. "Would you take $350? This haggling took me aback since we never discussed offers or negotiate via email. But $350 still meant decent money in my pocket. This bureaucratic back and forth was merely standard procedure for seasoned buyers. I nodded in agreement and Steve handed me a wad of bills. I fanned through them quickly. The money looked legitimate enough in the dim cafe lighting. We shook hands as I passed him the boxed phone, both of us appearing satisfied. Back home I finally relaxed, glad to have some extra income. But just to be certain, I took the cash out to double check under better lighting. My breath caught in my throat. The bills were clear fakes. On closer inspection, the holograms were missing details, the borders visibly miscut. Utterly counterfeit. Fury coursed through me, realizing Steve's entire ploy. The wary inspection, negotiating a lower price, all part of defrauding me smoothly. No wonder he conveniently only had large counterfeit notes to fool a cursory glance. I slammed my fist down, enraged at the deception. How could I be so stupid trusting this stranger? All that remained was a bogus email tied to nothing. Steve had pocketed my phone scot-free with his scam. Mulling over the shameful exchange, I'd noticed something that gave me pause. When Steve first arrived in his upscale clothes, I saw him hurriedly stash a lanyard badge in his jacket pocket. A glimpse of some corporate logo stood out, but his hand obscured the text. Could that detail lead to the cheat's real identity? I raced to my computer and after countless searches finally found a match. The badge was for an insurance firm downtown. I called, posing as a police officer investigating counterfeit activity potentially involving one of their employees. The company quickly revealed they had a Steve Green who matched my description perfectly. A sales manager at their headquarters branch on 5th Street. I almost shouted in revelation. The crook had used his real name and workplace unknowingly. Rookie mistake. Armed with Steve Green's information, I hatched a plan for counter-revenge. The next week I called his office posing as a lawyer. I claimed one of their employees withheld evidence related to an ongoing fraud investigation about a recent iPhone sale. Steve Green urgently needed to contact me before authorities got involved or risk the firm being subpoenaed. Before long, a nervous Steve was calling me back ready to negotiate. I savored every moment stringing him along, claiming the police had evidence tying him directly to the fake money. Playing up threats of criminal charges and career suicide, I portrayed a powerful attorney representing the investigation. By the end, Steve broke down in sobs, admitting the truth and begging mercy. The small act had gotten out of hand. He just needed fast cash for his daughter's medical bills. The sob story moved me low given the weasel's expensive watch while my fridge lay empty, but seeing him grovel put odds in my favor. I offered a simple proposition. Steve could avoid arrest by returning my phone immediately, along with cash to ransom it back at the full $400 sale price. A taste of karmic justice. He haltingly agreed after some dramatic coercion about prison sentences. We arranged to meet within the hour at a different location, Steve desperate to end his imagined legal plight. The scene was sweet redemption. My deceitful buyer handing me the phone like a kicked dog along with every last cent of his wallet, close to $500. I left Steve there crestfallen but unharmed, hopefully having learned his lesson. Grand larceny charges certainly awaited if he tried these schemes again on the vulnerable. Driving home with cash and phone in hand, relief washed over me. Maybe the world contained dishonest animals like Steve only out for themselves. But goodness persevered when people banded together. Steve targeted me seeing only some fool to cheat. But that same desperation he exploited in me gave strength to craft his downfall. Together, righteous souls could outwit any lone swindler. Where there's a will, there's a way. And when he least expected it, I had turned the tables completely on this wolf in sheep's clothing. Thanks for listening in. If you like these stories and want to hear more, then please subscribe and like and support this new channel. We have more stories for you to listen to.